What up, Fightful fam, and welcome to 1-2 Punch. Player 1, Shaquille Majui. Player 2, Irish Sean Sheehan. And buddy, I gotta say, we look like a couple of losers with our championship belts right here.
No, I'm a winner. This is like the severe MMA, fantasy MMA championship. Even though I didn't win it, someone in New Zealand won it, and it cost about €200 to send it. So it's just mine now.
I
I own
love it.
it. So
I
yeah.
love it. Yeah, I gotta say, although I'm, holding a true $25 child's belt here, yours is
hmm
actually very nice.
Yeah, it
That's
is
a
in
beauty.
fairness. My boy actually Ian O'Neill over in Canada with you, he made it. He got it made. It's actually hard to see it on camera because of the lighting and stuff, but
No, it's got
it's
great
pretty
detail.
yeah, severe MMA podcast on. I'll put a picture of it up later on, but it's a bit heavy.
Okay.
Heavy is the shoulder that wears the crown.
Yes, sir. Well, thank you so much for joining us today. Let's get right into it. For our regular listeners, thank you as always for tuning in, engaging with us. For people new to the program, this is 1-2 Punch. We operate on a win, lose, draw system. What that means is we're going to assign the week's biggest winners and losers before drawing up a preview for UFC Vegas 12. That's how we operate here. Shout out to everyone that is in the live stream chat. Please engage with us. Shoot us some messages. Tell us what you think. The more you do that, the more I know that this stream is operating just fine and my paranoia gets to settle down for the next 45 minutes. Let me hit this animated intro and we'll get right to it. There we go. Reminder, hit us up in the chat. We'll get to every comment we can. If you feel so generous, it's been a long day of MMA coverage for me. A little super chat donation might warm the heart. We really do appreciate that. And I think we are there. A quick subscription, a like on this video, notification bell, all that. I know it seems like a small act. I know it's annoying to hear, but it really does go a long way. Enough of that, especially to our podcast listeners who can't help us with any of that. Let's get right to the action. First up, winners. I guess if you're a Khabib fan, Dana White had some good news. He says that that Khabib will not be retiring, most likely, and that they're already discussing that 30-0 fight. Man, I ate shit on this one because I know
hmm
MMA retirements are temporary, but when Khabib says it, the man has some true resolve. And not only does he seeming to turn around on that record
hmm
time, not even Conor McGregor pulls this kind of stunt. What do you think about it?
I the thing about this is I was talking over in our severe MMA group there earlier on, and this is one of the toughest conundrums we can find in MMA. What do you believe? Do you believe an MMA retirement, or do you believe Dana White? It's
True.
which do you believe?
Fair
Both
enough.
of
It's
them.
like Schrodinger's
MMA,
cat.
yeah, MMA retirement never real. Dana White always lies. So I don't know what's going to happen. Someone's like, just there's going to be a fight in the moon or something. I don't know how to resolve it. Like, look, if past this prologue, then Habib will fight again. Let's be
Mm-hmm.
honest here. The one thing I'm like, I'm the one that kind of got myself and Graham over in the Sphere MMA podcast kind of got the hashtag MMA retirements going, because every time someone retires, I look forward to their next fight immediately. We're talking about Anderson Silva later on. I'm sure he's retiring this weekend. Obviously going to fight again. Everyone always fights again unless it's Cole Conrad. So
Mm-hmm.
when Habib retired in the cage, he said like about his father dying and about his mother. And Habib is one of these guys. He's a real guy. Like he's one of
Facts.
those, he when he says something he kind of means, and he's stuck to it, and he's always done that throughout his career, and he's never really cared about pleasing people or like pleasing the fans or anything like that. He's always done it the way he chooses to do it, and it's always been the right way. But MMA is a very difficult sport to retire from. These guys are fighters, and the ladies and everyone around the world. We see guys in the local scene here. We see in the UFC and Bellator. What they're bred to do is fight. They're fighters, and they're bred to never give up. They're trained to never give up, and you're asking them to give up, and that's a very hard thing to do, especially when you're someone who's 29-0,
Mm-hmm.
especially when you're someone who's the best in the world, never look like getting beaten. So will Habib come back? At the weekend, I said probably not. At my Q&A during the week, I said I'm probably 70% sure. I did another podcast, I was 40%. Now I'm probably down to about
Who knows
10%
where
now.
we are?
We'll see Habib back. Yeah.
That's crazy. Well, and I want to give a quick shout out to you. I always ask my guests, what would you like to drink? And finally, someone threw me a beer. Unfortunately, you've got a Heineken. I'm
Yeah.
stuck with a Molson Canadian because it's just what I had sitting in the garage.
Delicious. I've one of these as well.
Well, you have shown me
Some
so
proper
many
12
different
there.
alcoholic beverages. Private. Do you want to just like roll out the entire?
Yeah, I have here's some Fireball there. I believe that's a Canadian. So we can do Canada versus Ireland here for
Yeah,
now, Sean.
well,
There you go.
that's not a good showing from me, but I'm not sure if that's
No,
a good showing from you either.
I have some gin here as well.
Uh, Beefeater I can roll with. Beef.
No, I've actually just bought it there like an hour ago for my girlfriend, so I've never even tasted it. So we'll see what it's like. But yeah, I might pull out one or two more in the space of the
Throughout
podcast.
the length of the show, we'll certainly get.
See how
Well,
it goes.
I'm going away with a few socially distanced friends for a little cabin getaway. So this is
Mhm.
me warming up my body. I want to give a quick shout out before we get back to the MMA stuff. Gaz Cubbins in the live chat, really enjoying what Shaq brings to Fightful MMA. It's a work in progress. I love that support. He wants to get a bunch of people on the podcast. C from Ace Podcast, ex Cage Warriors champ, Danny Batten. He also gives you a big shout out, Sean, and loves the Irish in his roots. And shout out to Tim Traver for the super chat donation. He says, "What up, my Fightful family? Love the support, guys. If you are looking for some sort of MMA or pro wrestling community, I gotta tell you, I was shocked when I got over to Fightful. The people are nice, and I don't mean the people I work with, because Sean Ross Sapp kind of sucks, but the fans, the people who tune in, the people who engage in the chat, it is so refreshing when you have to deal with the sort of people Sean has to deal with on Twitter every single day."
Mm. Me, well, I have a good community as well. Our severe MMA community, especially over on Patreon, is brilliant. But the Twitter community at times can be rabid, especially when you're Irish and you pick Justin Gaethje to beat Khabib. People don't like you. You get a little bit of abuse, but yeah, look, these things happen. Like I've learned to deal with it. I've been on it for, I've been covering MMA for nearly a decade now, I suppose. So I'm well used to it. So it's, if you can't deal with that, I think you either have to find ways around it, which I've done, which is just blocking and muting people and ignoring people and not reading the timeline that much, or just like get off Twitter altogether, because it's not going to fix itself. You have to do it. That's my opinion on it anyway, I think so.
Fair. Now, final note on Khabib before we move on to my next winner. I know we don't really take these retirements at face value. Conor McGregor is someone who, plain as day, sort of employs it as a negotiation tactic or a way to sort of keep his name in the conversation. Do you give Khabib more of a pass, considering he's sort of processing his own emotions, he's processing his mother's emotions, thinking about what his dad wants? Does he get a little bit of a pass in terms of calling that retirement early, if that's the case?
The problem with this is we're basing all of this on Dana White saying something. Dana White's the biggest liar in the world. Should we really be taking this at face value? We probably shouldn't. We should probably still be thinking Khabib is retired and he's going to retire and all, but because of the whole MMA retirements, it's a conversation we've had 1,000 times, maybe not. But if Khabib wants to come back and was in the heat of the moment, if he was emotional because his father passed away, or even if he needs 6 months or if he needs a year off, absolutely, he deserves that. If he wants to change his mind and come back and have even one more fight or 10 more fights, he's absolutely entitled to do that. The problem is with MMA retirements is when someone gets to 40 years of age and they get knocked out 4 times, and they should not be fighting, and then they take a year out, say they're retired, and then they come back. That's the problem with MMA retirements. A 32-year-old or 31-year-old or whatever he is retiring undefeated, having lost 2 rounds in his whole career, I don't think it's the whole issue with the retirement thing. So if he wants to come back, absolutely no problem.
Right, fair enough. Now, let's move on to the other big winner for me, and that was Mike Tyson versus Roy Jones Jr. We had that big press conference on Thursday, and I gotta say, now, maybe you aren't a fan of the sort of old man fights, although I would say Mike Tyson versus Roy Jones Jr., if you're gonna have 2 retired guys come out and box, I think it's these 2. And then you have Jake Paul there, but at least he's taking on Nate Robinson, 3-time NBA slam dunk champion, a little bit of a different flavor than the usual YouTube on YouTube stuff. Rashad Coulter, former MMA fighter, is making the transition to boxing, and you have Badu Jack, big name in the boxing world. The production quality on that press conference was awesome. The fighters all had, except for, strangely enough, Jake Paul, who might be one of the wealthiest in that bunch, had perfect HD nice camera connections. You had Ariel Helwani hosting, went to the media nicely. I gotta say, I'm starting to get a little excited for this card. What do you make of it, especially compared to some of the other freak show boxing events we've had on DAZN over the past year or so?
I hope people aren't going to be like expecting some analysis from me. I didn't watch the press conference. I know Ariel was on it, so I'll fair juice Ariel. And Ariel likes things like this. I know he loves these sort of fights and being part of it as well. And that's the only reason I'd watch it. No interest in watching Mike Tyson, Roy Jones Jr. box. No interest in watching who's Jake? Is it a basketball player or something?
Jake Paul is Logan Paul's brother. You know that dude?
Oh
yeah.
He's
Dumb and Dumber.
Yeah, I like Badu Jack. I've seen him fight a few times before, so I wouldn't mind. And Rashad Coulter was good in the he was all right in the UFC, so I wouldn't mind seeing him doing a bit of boxing. But Mike Tyson, Roy Jones Jr. absolutely zero interest whatsoever. Is it a real boxing match or is it still an exhibition? Or
it's an exhibition technically, but then they're fighting for some sort of WBO title.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I don't have no interest. Like, the sad thing about Mike Tyson is, right, Mike Tyson puts out that video where he's shredded looking and he's hitting the bag and he's hitting it hard. And everyone's like, oh, Mike Tyson, he's going to come back. He could be champion of the world. Do we forget what happened to Mike Tyson? Do we forget what happened against Danny Williams and against that dude from Northern Ireland who was rubbish? I went in and Mike Tyson quit in the corner. Like, are we forgetting that when he was like, I don't know, 35 or something? Like, how is it going to be better now? Okay, if he goes out there and jabs around with Roy Jones Jr. for a while, maybe. But like, I have no interest in seeing this. It's a very typical like 2019, 2020 sort of fight really where it's going to be crap. We all know it's going to be crap, but everyone gets brought into it anyway. And there's like it doesn't even have like the intrigue or the fanfare of like a McGregor versus Mayweather or something like that, which I have no problem with seeing once every couple of years. But this is like I won't watch this. Other ones and other kind of fanfare ones I will watch because they're a bit of fun or whatever. This, I have no interest in this. If a bit of a video goes up afterwards or if a gif of a knockout goes up or something, I'll watch it, but I won't be buying it. It's on BT Sports box office. They want me to pay a fucking pay-per-view for this. They can fuck off. Are we allowed swear on this live stream?
Hey, man. We're drinking a beer already. What are you talking about?
No interest.
I will say this is a pretty harsh analysis from a man sitting next to a bottle of cinnamon Fireball whiskey and Irish Proper 12.
Well, nothing wrong with either of them. They're delicious. I haven't drank it. Well, I drank one bit of that cinnamon thing earlier on.
It's truly awful. Yeah. Apparently your cousin Patrick Sheehan is here. He says
brother. He's my brother. It's his
actually
whiskey,
your brother. I was gonna say brother. I didn't want to be too accurate. Wow, look at that. He says Fireball. He also tried Fireball whiskey for the first time today.
It's his. He bought it. Like he owns it.
That's what. Yeah, I would hope if I had a brother, he'd be tuning in too. So I love that sort of family support. And he also says, hope Tyson looks better than Chuck did for his comeback. Dude, anyone would look better than Chuck did in his comeback. I can't imagine he'd be any worse.
Yeah. Poor old Chuck losing to Tito as well. Like, when you look like Chuck did and you know how bad he was, surely like the people in his camp and he himself knew how terrible he looked. And like to go back and lose, like you should have found a way out of that fight, really. And like, because Tito was a far inferior fighter to Chuck Liddell in their primes, and Chuck obviously he knocked him out twice, didn't he, if I'm not mistaken? And now that's kind of been ruined a bit or tainted a bit by this freak show fight. So yeah, that's what can happen. Now this isn't the same sort of thing because obviously it's an exhibition and stuff, and maybe they'll just move around. But the last exhibition we saw was, well, maybe there's been other ones, but it was Floyd Mayweather versus Tinchin, and that started as an exhibition, but for me, it kind of turned into a real fight when Tinchin started punching him, and Floyd was like, "No, you're not going to do that to me." And Tinchin started playing a bit of pro wrestler and stuff after that as well. But Floyd was really hitting him, so it'll be interesting to see what happens there, I suppose, if you like that sort of thing.
Yeah, and Tim chimes in. I believe Tyson is going to gas out by round 4. Dude, I'd be surprised if Tyson didn't gas out by the end of round 2.
How many rounds is it?
I don't know, 6. Tim, if you know, please let us know. However many it is, it's probably too many, but this is interesting. My win is your loss. So before we move on to the loser section officially, are there any other winners you wanted to highlight over the last 7 days?
I think Dustin Poirier is the big winner of the last 7 days, to be honest, because beforehand we had Dustin Poirier sitting out for ages, and they offered him the Tony Ferguson fight on the card that happened last weekend, and he refused to take it. He wanted more money. Then Tony Ferguson kind of sat out with him, because they were talking about the Michael Chandler Tony Ferguson fight. Then Dustin Poirier gets switched from Tony Ferguson to Conor McGregor, which in itself is going to be a lot more money than he was hoping to get, and in more money on top of that because you're fighting McGregor. And now it looks like that Conor McGregor Dustin Poirier fight is going to be for a title. So like, you couldn't have had a bigger winner over the last few weeks than Dustin Poirier. He has everything has worked out perfectly for him. He sat out, didn't have to take a hard fight against Tony Ferguson. And now, okay, if we leave the Khabib thing aside and say Khabib is retired, or maybe he's gone up to fight GSP and vacating his title, you can't have a bigger winner, I don't think, in the last couple of weeks than Dustin Poirier. So he's my winner.
Yeah, I've had to regulate as much as we end up talking about it anyway. It feels like every title and thumbnail for ever since this show started has revolved around some combination of Conor McGregor, Dustin Poirier, Khabib, and Jon Jones. They've really been. It's in some ways it's fascinating how much they've been able to dominate discussion, considering the fact we still don't have a fight booked between Conor and Dustin.
Yeah, but I think it's going to happen because McGregor's in the gym now. He put out the thing today talking about lightweight, and he's looking in some shape already. And I was talking to someone about it last night. What have we now? The 30th of October. So we have, it's 10, 11 weeks until that fight is scheduled, maybe a little bit more even. That's a long time out to be preparing, and McGregor's already looking in good shape. So, this is, if that fight happens, I know people can get carried away sometimes with what Conor McGregor is as a celebrity and as a personality and all. But don't forget he's a great fighter, and don't forget Dustin Poirier is a great fighter. And if the two of them fight again, it's going to be a great fight. And I can't. That's what I'm interested in more than like the stories and the drama and all that. I'm interested in great fights, and that's definitely going to be.
Yeah, in some ways I hate myself because after watching your expert analysis breaking down how you're actually supposed to score fights, maybe it's just like an adjustment period, but like I'm not seeing it the same way, and it bothers me almost because the lenses I used to watch fights through were more fun. Now I'm looking at it, I'm like, I don't like the way this is going on the cards because I don't necessarily believe in it.
Yeah, it's happened to me as well since I started doing that. It's been a couple of years for me now, and it's very rare I'm drawn into a fight these days in terms of like the fight. And I was with the Khabib Justin fight just because there was so much kind of fanfare around it and everything. But when I watch fights these days, I'm very much watching it fighter A versus fighter B because of the judging. Like, judging is an interesting one because when you get drawn into it and you truly understand it, which I've attempted to do over the last few years, I'm not saying I'm fucking, Sal D'Amato or Bryn Cartlidge or anything like that, but I try my best to understand it as well, half as well as those people.
So I don't want to get into the whole discussion because it would be more than we have time for on this podcast, but let me just pick your brain for a quick second. So my very rudimentary understanding of it at this point is if one fighter lands the more impactful strikes, even if he lands less total strikes, they win the round. You don't even care about anything else that happened in the round.
Absolutely. If I'm fighting you, you hit me 100 times, and then I knock you down one punch at the end of the round, I will win that round if my one punch was more impactful.
Yeah.
The immediately, it's what I always tweet, immediately impactful strikes. So it's written in the criteria of MMA. Immediately impactful strikes are grappling is scored more heavily than the cumulative. So if you're hitting leg kicks and you hit 10 leg kicks and it, the leg is like hurt after 10 leg kicks, they won't score as high as if you hit one smashing leg kick and you see redness coming out and the guy's limping after it. That one scores more than those 10.
There we go. So, and this is a short conversation I had with a follower on Twitter, bless him, who was saying, you're an idiot. How did you score that fight, the Douglas Lima Mousasi fight for Lima? And I said, well, if you go by the rules from my limited understanding of them, especially in the latter rounds, Lima landed the harder shots. It may have just been some leg kicks, but he did. And the guy said, well, what about the takedowns and the forward pressure and the volume from Mousasi? I said, look, I agree with you. I think Mousasi won the fight, but I think Douglas Lima won the MMA competition based on how the judges are required to score it.
That's what I've been trying to do for the last 2 years, trying to change people. Like, and I was talking to a judge last night. It's like trying to change someone from Alex Jones to Bernie Sanders. That's what I'm trying to do. This is people who just will look exactly at one side of the argument. I'm trying to change it around and look at the exact opposite side, which is a side that we have to look at because those are the rules of the sport. But that fight last night, it was a very, very close fight by the judging criteria. Round one, all 5 rounds. Round one was close to a 10-8. Could be 10-9, could be 10-8 to Mousasi. Round two could have gone either way. Round three was I scored round 2 for Mousasi, but round 3 was a very, very close round. I scored it for Lima, but you could have scored it for Mousasi. That to me was a turnaround round. Around 4 and 5, I think Lima clearly won both of them. I think one judge, Jern Villel, gave both rounds to Mousasi, which to me is it's not terrible judging. It's not the worst judging in the world, but it's bad judging in terms of like the exact criteria and the way we want fights to be scored. So I think it's one of these fights that could be a draw, could be Lima, could be Mousasi. Yeah. It's one of those. And one last thing on judging. A close fight is a close fight. If I punch you once and you punch me once, who punched who harder? If you can decipher that, then you can decipher who wins the fight. But if you can't decipher that, it's always going to be close. Always going to be close.
Yes.
So, yeah.
And Tim Traver, this isn't a guarantee, but he says he heard that Tyson versus Roy Jones Jr. is 8 rounds. I don't see that going 8 rounds. If nothing else, I think the referee is just going to wave it off because both men are like in a heaving pile on the floor. But listen, legends, I love it. I'm gonna watch. I love me I'm gonna grab my taquitos. I'm gonna watch a little Jersey Shore to get hyped up, and I'm gonna get into full-on gross mode and digest everything. Everything from Jake Paul all the way up to Roy Jones versus Tyson. Okay, now Mousasi versus Lima is a good transition. Let's go very quickly to my loser of the week, which unfortunately is kind of the loser of the last several weeks, and that is Bellator. Granted, the Cyborg card wasn't bad. You tune in to see Cyborg brutalize someone, you did. The main card was exciting. You had Leandro Higo beat Ricky Bandejas, so that was fun. But their first CBS card, Michael Page headliner, was a snooze fest. They're arguably the biggest fight they've ever made, or they will make in quite a while. Douglas Lima versus Gegard Mousasi, total snooze fest. So 2 out of the 3 cards on the CBS Sports Network era have been kind of duds. I know it kind of just happens, like MMA is an unpredictable sport in that sense, but what do you think Bellator makes of all this? Do they really care? I would imagine it's just, move on with what's next.
Yeah, I was thinking about my loser as well, and it was Bellator was the one I was going to say, funnily enough, as well. And like the problem is, right, as you know very well, obviously, all the people in Fightful covering pro wrestling and WWE and stuff as well, it doesn't really matter as much the quality. It matters your TV deal and where you have things, and if you can survive in that way. And Bellator, are part of the Viacom, and I'm, part of CBS Sports. I'm not sure what's happening with the Zone. If that's, there was talks of it ending. I don't know. I know they were on the Zone last night. I don't know if it's ending the end of the year. Maybe someone in the chat can tell us or something. But it is. Bellator seems to be downsizing a lot because they've released, or I don't know if it's released or the fighters have come to the end of their tenure with Bellator over the last while. Yeah. Some in this side of the world, the Bellator Europe, they can't put on as many shows, obviously, over here. And a lot of the, Ricky Bandejas came to the end of his Bellator contract. I'm not sure if he'll re-sign or not, but Ryan Nelson, Frank Mir, loads of other people. And, some of those, okay, maybe it's okay. They should be leaving the promotion or whatever, but there seems to be a change in Bellator in the moment, and it's going to take a while. I'll give him a bit of time to see if it's positive or negative, but in the last while, it's not been great. That Cyborg fight was a good win and good fight for her. The fight last night wasn't great, but you've Mousasi back there, and I suppose you want a big name like that as your champion, and you still have Lima as champion, but I think Thursday night is a big issue. Over here we have the soccer, and we have the Champions League on a Tuesday and Wednesday night, and then on a Thursday night we have the Europa League, which is like the lower down teams. And there's this kind of joke, you don't want to be playing Thursday night football, and I think that's a kind of an issue as well with them, especially for this side of the world, because that card last night was on at midnight, and if you're working the next morning, you can't stay up and watch that card. So it's going to be a big issue, I think, for people. And I'm sure even, people in your side of the world as well are just like not going to be able to get time to watch it on a Thursday night.
I work my schedule to have weekday evenings off, so this has absolutely sucked for me, but I mean, it comes with the territory. My boss is up most nights till like 3 a.m, his local time, so I'm not allowed to complain.
Yeah. So it's that's the life you live when you're covering these sports, especially in this side of the world. Seriously. As well. But yeah, it's like Bellator. I had a real positive vibes with Bellator for a good while because they were doing events here, and the events they did was good, and they were run well. Yeah, and they were signing all of the they signed so much good talent in this side of the world and over in America as well. They signed like almost all the young talent. I remember, we do the yearly awards in Severe May, and you're looking for the young fighter of the year or the young up and coming prospect. And the majority of them are coming from Bellator. So they did a really good job, and they still have those people. So it's not all doom and gloom for Bellator, but definitely in the last couple of weeks it hasn't been amazing for Bellator.
Agreed. Now I want to very quickly touch on Gegard Mousasi because I was Granted, I scored the fight for Lima, but in my brain, if I'm just looking at it as what I consider an MMA fight to be, I thought Mousasi looked very good in there, especially in that first round. Completely overwhelmed Douglas Lima. We have this conversation from time to time, like, is Gegard Mousasi one of the best middleweights alive fighting right now? He left the UFC on such a high, coming off of that Chris Weidman fight. And then he comes over to the promotion. He wins the middleweight title, despite having that near setback against Alex Shlemenko. He beats Rory McDonald. And then he goes and he loses the fight to Rafael Lovato Jr., well, or Rafael, actually, because he's not from Brazil, if my Luke Thomas knowledge serves me correctly right now. Great grappler, but not someone super familiar with the mainstream audience. So you have Gegard, leave the UFC, go to Bellator, succeed, lose the title, have that split decision win over Lyoto Machida. That was a very close fight. And then he comes through and he performs very well against Douglas Lima, or at least very ably. And then I think, I know I'm going on a tangent here, but I think back to his time in the UFC, he has that loss against Uriah Hall, which was completely unexpected. And he turns around, he beats Uriah Hall. Is like Gegard Mousasi the greatest inconsistent fighter in UFC history?
There's a few of them, all right. But like the thing about the middleweight division, it's a pretty bad division. Let's be honest here. Like I'm looking at the UFC rankings here. You've Israel Adesanya and Robert Whittaker, two fantastic fighters. After that, you've Paulo Costa. We saw what he did against Adesanya. It looked terrible, to be honest. Like Jared Cannonier is ranked number 3 here in the UFC rankings. Come on, a good fighter, but let's be honest. Like Yoel Romero has lost every fight he's had in the last fucking 5 years. Darren Till, just go in there and take him down. You're going to beat him. Derek Brunson, a good fighter, but very inconsistent as well. And then you're going down to Kelvin Gastelum, Chris Weidman, who's knocked out every time someone fucking throws a pillowcase at him. So it's not a good division. Like the middleweight.
You're the right guy for this kind of show, Sean.
Thank you. The middleweight division is not a good division. So, like, if you were to slot Mousasi in there, you'd probably slot him in after Adesanya and Robert Whittaker, So, he'd be right thereabouts. He'd be definitely getting a title shot if he was in the UFC. But they're like the higher or the heavier you get, the more like inconsistently good you can be. I know, like, if you wanted to touch on Maurice Green and Greg Hardy in a second, like you look at that Maurice Green fight, you look at all heavyweights. I think it was Zane Simon actually put up a thing the other day about like the meta game for the different weight classes, and like the higher you get up, it's more down to like being able to take shots and being like athletic rather than your skill set. Like some of these guys, that's why we talk about the goal conversation. I know we won't get into that, but like Demetrius Johnson at a higher weight with his skill set and his ability would destroy Khabib, would destroy Jon Jones, would destroy all of them if we're able to magically move him up. But like the chin means a lot and athleticism means a lot at those weights. So I think middleweight is kind of the first of those weights when you're getting up there, that someone as skilled and athletic as Adesanya is really good, and someone with just like a really good chin like Robert Whittaker, who is really smart and who goes forward and who can land well, is the second best middleweight in the world, and not being particularly like excellent, although he's excellent at what he does. Yeah.
Okay, I like that take. Now we're heading through the final stretch of the show, so I do want to move on to our UFC Vegas 12 preview. But before we do that, and man, this program's starting to feel like the shit on Jon Jones party. But Jon Jones needs to take a break from Twitter. Like, I understand his argument. So I broke this down on my news short series Fightful Fix. For me, if you're gonna have the conversation about pound for pound GOAT, you have to understand what you're talking about. If you're talking about the pound for pound best fighter right now today, you can make a good case for Khabib. Last 3 wins are against Conor McGregor, Justin Gaethje, and Dustin Poirier, all by submission. If you compare that to Jon Jones's, he beat Anthony Smith, Thiago Santos, Dominic Reyes. One of those was a split decision. One of those, they're all decisions. One was a split, and one, in a lot of fans' eyes at least, should have gone to Dom Reyes. So if you look at the recent body of work, I'd argue Khabib has beat the higher level of competition more definitively and more decisively. If you want to have the greatest of all time conversation, that is a different conversation. You have to look through their whole record, and I'd argue that Jon Jones has beat 3 generations of the best UFC light heavyweights around. Khabib, outside of his last 7 or so fights, doesn't have a whole lot of really big names on that resume. So we have to make that distinction. Either way, like you said, we're not going to talk about that right now. Jon Jones, if you're going to start complaining about the pound for pound rankings, At least wait until the rankings come down. Don't do it right after Khabib wins. Is like sobbing on the mat for his late dead father. Like, John, what is this? You are one of the best fighters of all time. You would whip my ass in 100 times out of 1. Where's all this insecurity coming from, dude? You're one of the baddest motherfuckers on the planet. Just let Khabib have this sentimental pound for pound ranking for the time being.
To me, the most fucked up thing about this is what Jon Jones is crying about is like 12 guys from like 106.8, the fan in fucking Philadelphia who've watched 4 MMA fights in the last year voting on this. Like, it's not, you know, me or you or Ariel Helwani or Luke Thomas or whoever it might be voting on these rankings. It's some random guys that you've never heard of. I think there's like 1 or 2 legit people, but other than that, these rankings are a joke. Like, and I didn't even read Jon Jones's tweets. I didn't watch the video he put up, but I read one, and I kind of replied to him, and I never would normally do this. I was like, these rankings are a joke. Just stop caring about them. And it's, I know, like the rankings are good. They're good for me and you if we want to like I did a minute ago. I want to like look at a list of middleweights. They're great for that, but they're not great for like should Darren Till be above Cannonier or No. Not that. They're just useless for that. And if you're a fighter and you actually care about that, it's different if you're Lauren Murphy and you care about it, because if you're ranked number 1, it means something for you. You might get a title shot, you know. But if you're Jon Jones and you're obviously going to be ranked number 1, or he's not even ranked now because he gave up his belt, I suppose. We don't know what division he's in. You know, he moves to heavyweight and he calls out a middleweight. Typical Jon Jones. It's insecure is the right word, and that was the word I thought of in my head when I was seeing like some of his reaction, because like you're supposed to be the baddest man on the planet. Like everyone thinks Jon Jones can go up to heavyweight and win that belt, and he like everyone thinks. Forget about like pound for pound, and forget about who is the best, most skillful fighter of all time. If you're to look at pick one human being out ever who would win in a fight, maybe you pick Stipe, right? Maybe you would. Maybe you pick Brock Lesnar, but you're probably picking Jon Jones in that fight, aren't you? And he literally the greatest fighter in the history of humankind. And he's crying on Twitter because 12 lads from fucking Miami 102.4, the fan radio, voted against him. It's like, come on, man. You don't really need this, do you?
It is shocking when someone put a Reddit post up a few years ago. It is shocking when you find out who some of the people on these panels are. Like, they don't watch combat sports. They don't follow it. Their publication doesn't know anything about it. It's insane.
Did you see the time when McGregor knocked out Aldo? There was a Brazilian guy on it, and he ranked McGregor at like number 4 in his rankings, Aldo number 1, and they like moved Aldo up on the pound for pound rankings, and like it was just brilliant. Like, these guys don't care. It's hilarious.
Tim agrees with this. Says let Khabib have his time, John. God, it's a sentimental move. Just let the dude have it. Okay, we got to move on because we still got a lot on the plate. Before we do, reminder, hit us up in the chat, engage with us. We love to hear from you guys. Super chat donation goes a long way to helping sustain everything we do. If you got a beer, I hope you're drinking it responsibly.
I'm up in the second one,
yes, sir. And of course, gonna hit this subscribe animation very quick. Hit the notification bell, like button. These little metrics, small act from you. It really does a lot for us. So thank you so much. And to our podcast listeners, always surprised by the love, like truly multiples of what we get on YouTube. So shout out to you guys for always downloading the episodes and tuning in. It means the world to us. Okay, UFC Vegas 12. Let's drop a little preview here. I like to stay away from predictions because we got enough of that nonsense on every program out there. So let's talk about a few of the storylines going to UFC Vegas 12. Namely, and I think I'm going to be out of town this weekend, so there will be no Fightful Fix, but I'm going to clip this conversation coming up for it.
Sweet.
Win, lose, or draw. Should Anderson Silva retire on Saturday? Should he leave the UFC and keep fighting elsewhere? Should he fight in the UFC? And we can tackle it from what happens if he wins, what happens if he loses. Let's start with the easiest one. If he loses decisively, should he retire permanently, or should he go try his luck in one championship against Vitor Belfort?
That's a question I can't answer. It's like dividing by zero. It's just impossible. You can't do it. It's like, what is a retirement in MMA? Truly, like what? Like, I know a few people. Cole Conrad retired. Carl Pindred over here retired. I'm sure you can pick Mark Munoz retired. There's a few people have retired, but like, who actually retires? Like, the thing of Anderson Silva, should he retire? Like, if you want like a big long discussion about this, my point would be, you get to say a Frankie Edgar level, right?
Mm-hmm.
Where you had fought for the championship, you won it a while back, and then for years you were still in the championship mix. You know, you fought Aldo, you deserved to get a rematch at some stage. I thought you got a little bit early, but then you went on again and you fought Max Holloway. Sorry, my microphone falls down there, and you deserve to get that title fight. It's at that point when you're, I think he's, oh, how many years is it? 9 might be too much, but it's over 5 years since he won the title.
Mm-hmm.
And you have done it all, and you're only going to go down from that stretch. I know he won his last fight and he looked good and everything, but you're not going to be in the championship picture anymore. For me, that's the point you should retire. When you have it all done and you have all your options exercised to be in the championship, and you know that you're getting older and you're past your athletic best, and you've had so much in cage action that it can only get worse. That's when you should go down. Mm-hmm. Not when it gets worse. Not when you get to BJ Penn levels. Not when you take so much damage that you know later in life it's going to hurt. And there's obviously a lot of wrestling fans listening to this. We know what headshots can do to people later in life, and even early in their life after their athletic prime. So that's my opinion on fighters like Anderson Silva, like Frankie Edgar, like Diego Sanchez, people who've been in there for a long time, putting on lots of great fights for us. I wanted them to do it for their health before they get to that point. Now, Anderson has taken a few losses. The only non-UFC champion he's lost is Jared Cannonier, so that's not bad. So is he at that point yet? He is at that point, I think. Now would be the time for him to retire. Win, lose, draw, I'd love to see him retire, but will he retire? Absolutely not.
Yeah, this seems like more, because it's weird, because Anderson has tackled this from every end of the spectrum. The UFC, Dana White first said that this will be most likely Anderson's retirement fight. Anderson at one point said no, I think he said yes, it will be, and then his coach said no, and then Anderson said not really, and now we're thinking it's probably his last UFC fight, but it's possible he actually has 2 fights left on his deal. It's chaotic, more chaotic than usual. I think. I completely agree with where you're coming from. I think, and we're teasing Mike Tyson and Roy Jones Jr., but make no mistake, they are the greatest of their time. They would still destroy most living people on this planet. And if they want to go out there and put on an exhibition show and make some money, and, it fuels them and motivates them in their lives, they 100% have my support, and I wish them nothing but the best. I agree with you. I don't think Anderson Silva's place is in the UFC fighting ranked competition anymore. He's not going to be UFC champion again. I don't know if he's come to that realization, but I would hope he has. If he wants to go and, semi-retire and do the oddball money fight against a Vitor Belfort over in one championship or something, I say more power to you. As long as you're not in sort of a physical state the way Chuck Liddell was going into that Tito Ortiz fight, I've got no problem with guys semi-retiring from legitimate top-level competition and then doing the Floyd Money Mayweather thing, coming out, putting on a show, making some money. We see pro wrestlers do it in their twilight years. Sure, I'm not going to stop people from getting their bag, but I agree with you that even if he wins this fight, which going into it, I had more optimism than I do now. I was talking to Eric Anders about this fight, and I do believe him when he says that ever since linking up with Saif Saud over at Fortis MMA, that Uriah Hall has really put together the mental pieces of his game, which has long been a struggle for him. And I know he was he showed complete dissatisfaction, disinterest at the virtual media day. The last time I talked to him in person, he did seem to be more composed, and seems like he's reached a lot of conclusions about himself personally. So I worry a little for Anderson Silva going into this fight. Although I do think he has the sort of defense to make a decision. If it was a 3-rounder, I'd actually think it would go to a decision. I don't know about 5 rounds. But yeah, I think win, lose, or draw. It's time for Anderson Silva to at least move on from the UFC.
Yeah. I would love to see him put up on a pedestal and say, here, there's Anderson Silva, give him bow out, but it probably won't happen. I see the fight going the same way as you. I think this fight reminds me a little bit of, and obviously a different level, but of Jan versus Aldo a little bit, in terms of, like, I think Anderson Silva will do well for the first couple of rounds, especially the way he fights, kind of low output, looking for shots, looking for those reads, as Dominic Cruz would say, early in the first couple of rounds. But I think if you play that fight with Uriah Hall, you're going to take a few shots, and you're probably going to land a few shots as well. But I think, like Aldo did in that fight, he's going to get a little bit tired, and when it comes to the 3rd and 4th round, I think it's going to be too much for him, and I think Hall 4th round KO. That's my prediction. There you go.
Yeah, I think something similar may happen. Very briefly, before we move on from Anderson Silva, I was listening to the MMA fighting live stream for the UFC Vegas 12 weigh-ins, and Casey Layden was talking about how you sort of look at the pound for pound, the greatest of all time in segments based on certain parts of their careers in which they sustain dominance. If you look at Anderson Silva's career as a whole, you may drop him down that ladder of pound for pound greats. But if you judge him only on his prime, he's on the Mount Rushmore for sure. And maybe this isn't maybe this is a view that other people don't share. But why is it that you can take a shot, do your armchair psychology here? Why do you think it is that I still view Anderson Silva as one of the greatest of all time, but I don't Ronda Rousey?
I 100% have thought about that before, because I think Ronda Rousey that way. I think people give Ronda Rousey too much of a hard time. The problem with Ronda Rousey is when Anderson Silva did it, men's MMA was at a place where it has had years and years and years of development, whereas women's MMA wasn't. And that's not me being sexist or anything, but it's getting that way. Look where it is now. It's way better, and that's because of Ronda Rousey. So the game passed Ronda Rousey by a little bit, and now you have brilliant fighters like Amanda Nunes, who beat Misha Tate and beat Holly Holm and beat the people who came before her, and even people now who maybe you wouldn't have expected out of people like Lauren Murphy and people like that, and the likes of Cynthia Calvillo coming through, and the likes of Valentina Shevchenko, brilliant. And without Ronda Rousey, they wouldn't have been there. But I view Ronda Rousey as more of a Heist Gracie or a Chuck Liddell.
Yes.
And if you want to talk about greatness, I think Heist Gracie needs to be up there in the GOAT campaign or in the GOAT talk, but not in the best of all time talk. We all know if Khabib or Jon Jones would destroy him, but when you're talking about greatness, Ronda Rousey was a great fighter for what she did in her time. Same with Anderson Silva, same with Heist Gracie, same with Chuck Liddell, same with Randy Couture. Like, Chuck Liddell would get destroyed by Jon Jones or Jared Cannonier, any of the guys today. That's just how much MMA moves on. The exact same happened with Ronda Rousey. So I think it's, the problem with Ronda Rousey is she isn't the nicest person in the world, I think, to a lot of people. And this is not me thinking it. I think Ronda Rousey is lovely, but a lot of people don't. And especially media people don't like her because she refused to speak to them. That's her prerogative, in my opinion. If she doesn't want to speak, she doesn't want to speak. But her doing that got more of a negative vibe around her. So that's the problem with Ronda Rousey. But one last point maybe on the Anderson Silva thing. I think if you wanted, and that kind of compartmentalize, I don't know, how's that word?
Compartmentalize?
Yeah. If you look at Anderson Silva and how good he was, the kind of the bad parts of his career, including the drug test failure, came after he broke his leg and he snapped his leg and he lost his title. So if you want to, one thing we always say, we take people out, we take Jon Jones out, we take, other people out because of the drug test failures. And people take Anderson Silva out because of that. I don't think that's fair. Like, Anderson Silva in the middle of his career wasn't failing drug tests like Jon Jones is. He failed them after he snapped his leg, and he was losing there anyway. Like, I have sympathy for someone who takes drugs or who gets caught for PDs and that sort of situation. Do I have sympathy for the guy who's the greatest fighter of all time and is in the middle of his career and is beating Alexander Gustafsson, Daniel Cormier, and all them? Absolutely not. And I'm not the biggest. I'm more on the Luke Thomas side of the whole drugs thing. I'm just like, let them all take it. But that's my point in that. Anyway.
Okay. Are you okay to go a few minutes over, Sean?
Let's go. Let's go. Let's go another hour. Let's do it.
I don't know about that.
I have a full bottle of proper 12 beer to drink.
You know what? I'm actually my friend who's an actress is in the process of helping me secure an agent. But after I know for sure that I'm allowed to drink on air, we will do a whole episode where we down up 2-6 of what you might. I don't know. Yeah, we'll drink a lot of Irish whiskey because I haven't had proper 12 yet, and we'll get it done.
Even though I hate whiskey.
I hate most liquor, but you do it. I like the effects. Okay, as we wrap up here, quick shout out to Greg Hardy. Part of the reason we were late with getting the live stream links up and everything. Sorry to Joseph and some of our regulars who might have missed it. Greg Hardy weighed in at the final seconds of the UFC Vegas 12 weigh-ins. He is a heavyweight, and he missed weight, 266.5. I don't know if the heavyweights get a 1 pound allowance, but either way, he blew it. And so, yeah, just shout out to Greg Hardy. Always finds a way to complicate a situation. But I hope he makes weight because I don't want to see people lose money. And although it'd be nice for Maurice Green to get a bonus.
Mhm.
And yeah, I want to see that fight one way or the other because this is actually a sneaky good card. But as we wrap up here, as is tradition on the show, I asked you to, first and foremost, actually, I have to ask, what
Mhm.
have you done? Who have you favored to get your tweets on the UFC broadcast so frequently?
I don't
Not that
know.
I care, like, not that I need that to feel validated, but I always see you on there, my man.
I don't know. They just they just come up. I have no idea. I'm not friends with anyone.
Do we know
Actually,
who it
I
is? Do we know who this
no.
person is?
I have no. Maybe I don't know. I actually don't like. Do you, I'm not particularly liked by people in the UFC. I find it very hard to get an email back. I don't say the nice things in the world about the UFC, so I'm not sure how it gets up there. But it's funny because like, I love it when I'm like watching a card with someone and I'm just like on my phone and we're watching, and they're like, "There's you on the screen." So yeah, I'm like that Leonardo DiCaprio gif where I'm just like pointing at the
I
screen.
love it.
But yeah,
Love it. Okay, so this is what we're gonna do. Do you have an embarrassing story loaded?
yeah, I kind of have. Yeah.
Okay, good. So I'm gonna let you flip. I got a coin flipping app here because it's 21st
Okay.
century. You call it. I'll tell you if it's heads or tails. Will I lie? Maybe. We'll find out. You'll never know. Um,
Okay.
heads or tails? Call it.
Heads.
It is tails. Didn't
Okay.
even have to lie about it. So, what is your story? And thank God because I forgot to come up with one today.
I actually asked Patrick there earlier on what embarrassing story I would have. My my one, it's not. I suppose it's not that embarrassing. You'd have to be there, but the last Bellator media day. So Liam McCourt was fighting Judith Ruiz in the main event after who? Oh, James Gallagher was supposed to fight in the main event and it got cancelled, and that was the main event anyway. So her opponent, I went and I interviewed Liam McCourt, and I think Aaron Chalmers was there and a few more of the fighters as well. I went to interview them all, and then I went to interview Judith Ruiz, and so I went up and I just said, "Hello, Judith, how are you?" And she was, "Oh, hello," and it was grand and everything. So I went and I like asked her the first question, and then she like looked at her coach that was with her. So I was like, "What's going on here?" And then he kind of told her the question in German. So I was like, "Oh shit!" I never realized she didn't really speak English. But then she started like half answering me in English. So I was like, "Oh, it's okay, we'll get away with it or whatever." So, and then she looked back at him, and then he answered the question as well in English to me. So like he translated our English, and I'm here. I'm like, "What is going on here?" So then I asked another question, and she just looked at him, and then he answered the question and just gave it back to me, and she said nothing. And then I asked another question, and he did the exact same. I was like, "You're in the main event here, and I'm interviewing this guy while you just stand here as the two of us talk over it." And it was just, and I got completely flustered, and I was like I'm not a great interviewer. I don't like interviewing people, and it's not my gig. I only do it because we've no one else to do it, basically. And I was like, "Yeah, I can't post that interview." It was so bad. And I was talking to a couple of the other people there afterwards, and I was like, I fucked that up, Riley. And I saw one of the other lads gone up and he interviewed her, and he came back like literally about 45 seconds later. I was like, I can't use that. It's so bad because I don't know, like, and it wasn't, I don't know whose fault it was. Maybe Bellator should have had a translator there, or maybe they should have had something there, but it was very embarrassing because I like the three of us were standing there at one point and we were all looking at each other and was like, this is going really badly. This is going like just so badly. But yeah, that's and another time at a Bellator media event as well. And a lot of people I think would have seen. I interviewed Richard Kiley when he was fighting Michael Venom Page, and I had said on my podcast that Kiley could get knocked out in like the first minute or two, and he kind of called me out on it in the middle of the interview. Which was, and we had a bit of a back and forth. It was fun, but like it was I thought it was a little bit embarrassing. So
Yeah.
he did get knocked out after like 2 minutes, so you can't blame me. So.
Well, there you go. Yeah, I sometimes ask myself when I'm interviewing fighters, especially over the phone, and they have a translator. Well, not a translator. They have their manager conferenced in.
Yeah.
I'm not sure I'm actually getting quotes from the fighter half the time. If it's like an independent translator, sure, but most of the time it's like the guy's manager, and I'm not at all confident that I am hearing the translation that I'm supposed to be hearing.
Yeah, it's tough. All right, yeah, it's like whenever I remember I actually interviewed Douglas Lima as well once, and I did it over the phone, and there was like a huge delay on it, literally like about 20 seconds of a delay. And I remember I asked him a question, and then there was a delay, and he answered it. And I started asking him another question, and he just like started talking to like his manager or the PR guy, whoever was on the phone. I was like, oh, he's not gonna hear me here, is he? It's just a fucking disaster. But
Oh,
yeah.
that's MMA for you. It's not a whole lot smoother in the entertainment industry either. All right,
Mm-hmm.
Sean, that is all the time we have today. Thank you so much for being so generous. Is there anything you want to leave the people with?
Yeah, not much. Follow me on Twitter at Sean Sheehan BA, patreon.com/Severe MMA podcast. True Balls. If you like soccer, do a live stream, myself and two of my friends over in True Balls. We do it for Man United matches and just talk an all merciful amount of shit. So yeah, find us there. Listen to Severe MMA podcast, subscribe. It's up for free every Sunday, and there's like 5 additional shows every week on Patreon. So if you don't want to pay for it on Patreon, just subscribe on iTunes, Spotify, and all those places.
Facts. And on your way to subscribing to all of Sean's good work, hit a subscribe button here for us. That would mean the world. Always a blast. Thank you for everyone who engaged in the live chat. Sorry to those that we missed today. Shout out to everyone who downloads these episodes every week. Means the world to us. For Fightful MMA, I'm Shaquille Majuri. And because none of you have pitched any good outros yet, I'm going to go with the one that everyone hates. Keep up with us for everything Fightful and so delightful. It's the worst.
I like that.
It's so... And we'll hit this outro.
Fightful.com